He thought he did everything right. He sold his car through Facebook Marketplace, met the buyer in person, watched him take a test drive, negotiated like a normal human being, and accepted a cashier's check from a major national bank. He waited for the funds to clear before he signed anything over. 4 days later, the money showed up in his account. He handed over the title, watched the guy drive away, and felt completely fine about the whole thing. 2 weeks later, his bank called him and took back every single dollar. $9,500. Gone. Account in the negative, rent due, savings wiped out, and the man who handed him that check, disconnected phone, fake address, vanished. This is not a story about someone who made an obvious mistake. This is a story about a scam so well designed that it specifically exploits the things careful people do to protect themselves. And if you have ever sold anything of significant value to a stranger, or if you ever plan to, you need to hear every detail of what happened here. Let's talk about where this started and why it was always going to go this way. A man in Atlanta listed his 2017 Honda Civic on Facebook Marketplace for $9,500. That is a reasonable price for that vehicle. The listing probably looked like 1,000 other listings. Nothing unusual. A buyer reached out, they arranged to meet, the buyer showed up in person, behaved completely normally, took a test drive, asked reasonable questions, and then negotiated a little on the price. All of this is exactly what a legitimate car sale looks like. There was no red flag waving in the air. There was no moment that felt wrong. The buyer offered to pay with a cashier's check drawn from Wells Fargo. And here is where we need to pause, because a lot of people watching this right now believe exactly what the seller believed in that moment. A cashier's check feels safe, it feels official, it has a bank's name on it. It is not a personal check that might bounce because someone overdrew their account. It is supposed to represent funds that the bank itself has already verified and set aside. It is supposed to be, in the common understanding of most people, basically as good as cash. That belief is exactly what makes cashier's check fraud so effective and so devastating. The seller deposited the check. His bank showed the funds as available after 4 days. He interpreted that to mean the check had cleared. He signed the title over. The buyer drove the car off the lot. The seller went on with his life. Now let's slow down and follow what was actually happening underneath the surface during those 2 weeks. Because understanding the mechanics of this fraud is what will protect you from it. When you deposit a check, your bank is required by federal law to make funds available to you within a certain number of business days. For cashier's checks, which are considered lower risk, banks often release those funds faster than they would for a personal check. But here is the critical thing that most people never learn until it destroys them. Funds being available in your account is not the same thing as a check being verified as legitimate. Your bank releases the money to you based on a provisional assumption that the check is good. They haven't actually confirmed with the issuing bank yet. That full verification process can take weeks. If the check turns out to be fraudulent at any point during that process, the bank claws the money back from you, not from the person who gave you the fake check. From you. The fraudster who handed over that check knows this. He planned this entire interaction around that gap in time. He designed the transaction to be completed and himself to be unreachable before the bank ever figured out what happened. So 2 weeks after what felt like a perfectly normal car sale, the seller's bank called him. The check was fraudulent. The $9,500 was being pulled back. His account went negative overnight. He tried calling the buyer. The number was disconnected. He drove to the address the man had given him. It was an empty lot, not a house, not an apartment, an empty lot. The address had been fabricated. The phone number was likely a prepaid or temporary line. The name may or may not have been real, and the car, his car, was gone. He filed a police report. Here is something genuinely useful he found out. The detective who took his report explained that cashier's check fraud is a criminal offense, not just a civil matter. Under Georgia law and under federal law, manufacturing or passing a fraudulent check is a crime. This means there is at least a theoretical path toward prosecution if the person is ever identified. The police did take it seriously. A detective was assigned. But here is the hard truth he was also facing. Taking it seriously and solving it are two different things. The buyer had given a fake address and a fake phone number. If the name was also fake, there may be almost nothing to trace. Law enforcement has limited resources, and these fraud cases, while criminal, often go cold when the suspect leaves no real identifying information. He had a few pieces of potential evidence working in his favor. Facebook Marketplace profiles sometimes contain linked information, photos, or account histories that investigators can subpoena. If the buyer used any real information anywhere in the process, a financial crimes detective might be able to surface it. Wells Fargo, whose name was on the fraudulent check, has its own fraud investigation unit and may cooperate with law enforcement. And if the buyer ever tries to register that vehicle in Georgia or any other state, there could be a paper trail created at that moment. He asked specifically whether the Georgia DMV would notify him when the buyer attempted to register the car. The realistic answer is that the DMV process does not typically send automatic alerts to previous owners. However, the fact that he signed the title over matters here in a complicated way. Because he transferred the title, the car is legally in the buyer's name from a paperwork standpoint. If the buyer registers it, that registration goes in the buyer's name. The previous owner would not automatically be contacted. But here's where it gets interesting. If the seller has filed a police report and there is an active fraud investigation, law enforcement can flag the VIN in their systems. If that vehicle is ever pulled over, ever involved in an accident, ever scanned by a police plate reader, it could trigger a connection to the open investigation. He should also report the fraudulent check to the Federal Trade Commission, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center known as IC3, and directly to Wells Fargo's fraud department. Reporting to the bank whose name was on the check matters because these institutions track patterns. If this scammer has done this before, and scammers like this almost always have done this before, multiple reports may help connect the dots. Now let's talk about what you can do to make sure this never happens to you. The core lesson here is that cashier's checks are not safe for large private transactions. Period. The financial industry knows this. Banks know this. The only people who don't know this are regular people trying to sell their cars and electronics and furniture to strangers online. If you are selling something valuable to a private buyer, there are two payment methods that are actually safe. One is cash. Real physical cash, verified with a counterfeit detection pen or verified at a bank branch. The other is a wire transfer directly into your bank account, confirmed with your bank before you hand anything over. A wire transfer is not reversible the way a deposited check is. Once it hits your account and your bank confirms it is settled, it is there, not provisionally, actually there. If a buyer wants to pay with a cashier's check and you are open to it, do not accept it and wait for your bank to show the funds as available. Instead, go to a branch of the bank whose name is on the check, in person, and ask them to verify the check before you deposit it. Banks can often tell you on the spot whether a cashier's check is genuine. If the buyer cannot accommodate a brief delay for that verification, that is your answer right there. Meet in a public place whenever possible and use your phone to photograph the buyer's ID, their license plate, and the check itself before you hand over any documents. If someone refuses to let you photograph their ID during a $9,000 transaction, that is not a buyer you should be doing business with. And for car sales specifically, do not sign the title over until you have confirmed payment in a way that cannot be reversed. A car is a high-value asset, and the title is the thing that makes it yours. Protect it like it is worth the money that it is. For the person in Atlanta who went through this, the situation is genuinely painful and there is no easy resolution. The criminal investigation is the most viable path forward. Cooperating fully with the detective, providing every piece of communication, every screenshot, every text message, the Facebook profile, everything is the most productive thing he can do right now. Some of these cases do result in arrests, particularly when investigators find a pattern of the same scammer targeting multiple people. It is not hopeless, but it is also not quick. If this happened to you, Or if you are dealing with a situation where you were paid with a fraudulent check or money order for something you sold, document everything you still have, file reports with local police, the FTC, and IC3, and contact the bank named on the fraudulent instrument directly. These scams are more common than most people realize, and the victims are almost always people who were careful. They did research, they thought they were protected, and they got hit anyway because there was one thing they did not know. Now you know it. Share this video with anyone you know who is selling a car or anything else of value to a stranger. It could save them from learning this lesson the hard way. And if you want to keep up with stories like this one, cases where the law meets real life and real money, subscribe so you never miss what we cover next.